Great, here we go. So welcome everybody to this. Well, it's not a hangout on air, but it is a remote interview. And I'm here today with Yves. And Yves, I don't know how to say your last name. I meant to ask you before we start. Why don't we start with that?
So my last name is Hanoulle, and I actually have a small 10-second video on YouTube because I ask that question a lot. Every time I speak somewhere, the people ask me, how do you pronounce it? So I just said, let's create a very small recording to show people or to remember. And it's funny because a lot of people, they don't know how to pronounce it, and most people don't even know how to write it. I even have friends who tell me, oh, they wrote your name wrong again when it's actually written correctly. So, which is
funny.
I'm used to these kind of things. Yes.
Okay. Yes, and I felt like a typical American asking, of course, because all of the foreign names I tend to have issues with. But welcome. It's exciting to be here and finally to meet you. And I understand that you're an agile coach and you work with distributed teams. But actually, you said you call yourself a creative collaboration agent. A facilitator of innovation.
Well, a little correction. Right now, I'm not at this point. I'm not even working with a lot of remote teams, but I've been doing that. I've started my first remote team in 2004, 2005, something like that. And to then go back to the real question, creative collaboration agent, because for me, what it really means is working with teams is about. Yes, about making them sure that they collaborate and they work together. And sometimes you have to use creative ideas to make sure that people actually do work together. And I don't remember what time, I think a year or two ago, I said, well, everybody starts to call him agile coach. So I said, I need to have some differentiator and see, okay, what is it about me? And like you said just before, I'm doing a lot of collaboration online with a lot of people in the community. So I said, okay, collaboration is definitely something I like. I thought about creative collaboration coach, but that creates CCC, which has a different naming in Belgium, which is a terrorist organization from 10 years back or something like that. So
oh, wow.
I said,
right.
The abbreviation CCA is then probably a little bit better. So, yeah.
Right. Weird things that people don't think about or know about even.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it when I first used the name. And then people said, you know how it's abbreviated? And I said, yeah, CCC. And I said, oh, okay, I understand why you said that.
So you said you're located in Belgium, is that right?
That's correct, yes. At this moment, I'm located in Belgium. I've moved with my family in 2010 for a year to Bordeaux to help a team over there. But we've moved back in September at the moment that one of my kids had to start learning to read and write. And we preferred that he could do that in his mother tongue.
Ah, okay.
So...
And tell me about your Anywhere office. And I think people watching this video are going to be noticing that you're walking while we're talking.
Yes, so I have been very interested in walking in a walking desk for a very long time. Actually, in 2011, I was thinking about that. And we were actually thinking about, so we're actually this year we're going to build a house or reconstruct and do a lot of things. And I was thinking and talking to the architect, let's create a walking office or a walking desk in my office. And then I realized, this is very big design up front because we're designing everything and I've never ever had a walking desk. I read about it, I learned about it, but I was designing a full office to have that without having it. So the moment I realized that, I said to my wife, I'm just going to buy it. Let's invest in this. Which was the very first time I actually invested something in my office. I invested a lot of hardware, but I've never actually invested a lot in furniture. Typically IKEA furniture or secondhand furniture I had lying around. So this time it was very expensive. I invested, I don't know the exact amount, I think about 3,000 euros with a movable desk. So let me show you. So I can just lower my desk electronically and then move it back up, which is good because there are ways you can do that mechanically, but then you always have to find the right thing. And sometimes there are moments that it's just a little bit higher, a little bit lower. It's just better.
Yeah.
And now it's at max height. So below there is a normal treadmill. that I bought, and I bought in a store where they didn't understand anything I was trying to explain to them. So basically what I wanted to do is buy a normal treadmill and then not put on the original part. So from a normal treadmill, before you have some bars and whatever. So I didn't want to put that on. I just want to put the table in front of it. And so they didn't think, so they helped me and figure. Basically what I had to do was when it arrived, I didn't have to mount these things, which was good because I didn't have to dismantle. And I just had to change a little bit the wiring so that I didn't have these bars lying around here, which would make it a little bit dangerous.
So I know I've been interested in a standing desk or a walking desk actually for years, and I just haven't gotten around to buying it. But I know that a lot of remote workers overwork because we're at home. It's really easy. You can really get into the flow. You can be sitting all day long. So have you found, I know that a lot of remote workers would like a walking desk. So tell us about the differences that you're finding.
So one of the things I'm finding is that, for example, something that typically happened a lot to me, if I'm working somewhere else and then in the evening I go to my office just quickly to check something on my computer, what typically happens, I check something quickly to my computer and then 3 hours later I'm still at my desk because that quickly turns out a long time. So what I'm doing now is when I go quickly to my computer just doing something, I don't turn on my walking desk. And I think in less than 10 minutes, I realized, hey, something's wrong because it doesn't feel well. So just standing doesn't work for me. I've known that a few people say, well, I start with with a standing desk, and when that works, I might invest more. And said, well, it doesn't work for me. I really realized that it just doesn't. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that's the maximum. So I will notice at my body that something's wrong. I don't like it, and the idea was that with this desk, because I can lower the desk, I could just put a piece of wood on the treadmill and sit down on it with a chair. I've noticed that I think I did it 3 times since December 2012. So basically, I'm not doing that.
So you're really walking all the time while you're working.
So at some points, I might be turning it off a little bit, but I very quickly turn it off. What I mostly play with is the speed. And this is why, for me, a normal treadmill works so well, because you can buy walking desks, but they have preset speeds. So basically, you have a few speeds, and that's it. With a normal treadmill, you can set your own speed at anything you want. So if I look now, I'm at 4 kilometers an hour, which is pretty fast.
Yeah.
I started with 1.8 or something like that, which is what they were advised. Very quickly I noticed that doesn't work. So in the first week, I moved very quickly to 2.6, something like that. And now over the years, I moved a lot faster. There were moments that I can do it at 5 or 6, but then it's for doing things like we're doing now, just talking, browsing a little bit, typing. That doesn't work at 5 or 6 kilometers an hour. When I'm really tired, like last night, I worked until I think 1 or 2, something like that, working with a colleague remotely on a Google Doc. And I've noticed that at some point I just set it back to 2 kilometers an hour, which was for me very slow, but for a lot of other people it's still fast.
Right.
And like I said, I just in the introduction, I did 4,000 steps just last night. So that is, I don't know, in 1 or 2 hours, because that was after midnight.
Right, and clearly all the evidence is in that this is a much healthier way, that sitting all day is really unhealthy for the body. So
yes, what I've noticed is that I don't lose weight or anything like that. I'm not tracking it. My mother sometimes say, yeah, now you're losing weight, but I don't think so. I think I'm still at the same weight, but for me it's feeling much more healthy. What I do notice is that because I'm at my desk, I might drink a lot more water because I have everything. Well, actually, I was about to say everything available, and now I just have a cup of coffee, and that's about it. But normally, I have about a few liters of water around me, so I can drink something. So the normal breaks would be breaks when I go to the toilet, something like that.
Right.
But that's about it. For example, something I've noticed is that I have my own company, so I do a lot of my own accountancy, and I don't like to do it. So typically what happens is start to do it, and after half an hour, I get bored, so I read some emails, I get distracted. On my walking desk, I can do it for 2-3 hours and just keep doing it, because there's so much. I think it's about blood being pumped to my brain and to my heart or whatever, so that I can actually keep concentrating a lot more. For some people who might know about, in 2007, we started creating a New Year's video. So one of the things I'm doing in November and December in the evenings, I'm preparing a New Year's video, and that's based on all the pictures we took in the full year with our family and putting it together on some piece of music. So the last 2 years, I did that also while walking. So it's not really editing, it's just moving a little bit pictures around. So it doesn't demand so much detail, but still it shows a lot that you can do that on a walking desk. I do have, I'm not sure if it's really that important. I have something that's called, I'm not sure if you can see it, a hand shoe mouse, which is a really strange mouse.
Oh, yeah.
Because, so I can really put my hand on top of it and I can move it around like this. So now I'm holding it, but typically you don't hold it. You just put your hand on top of it and you move it. So that's one of the things that I've done. But that one I had, I think, already 2-3 years before I was having my walking desk, because at some point I had some problems with my hands, typical RSI kind of thing. And when I talked to my doctor, I asked him what's the best mouse to buy, and he said there is nothing best. What you need is multiple devices. So next to it, I also have, I don't think it's attached now, but I have something that's called a vertical mouse. So that one you just grab like this and you move like that. The difference is that your wrist is not torn when you click it.
Okay.
And so these are two different devices that both tell it's the best one for your wrists. But for me, the good part is just changing it.
I think that's very smart advice. Weirdly enough, I hadn't thought of that before, but that makes perfect sense. Of course. Right.
Yes, and it was, when my doctor said it, I was like, of course, yes, that's what you would advise to a lot of people. And just, I had the same reaction as you, like, why didn't I think about that before?
Right. It seems so simple, like somehow it seems like, oh, of course.
Yeah, so now I have lots of different, so both of these mouses I just shown you are rather expensive. I think about €100 or something like that. But if I have to go once to the doctor or stay one day at home, it will probably cost me a lot more.
Right.
So I said,
RSI is far more expensive than a mouse.
Exactly. That was the reason why. And so I have actually, at my current client, I use mostly a trackball, but a wireless trackball, which is interesting as well, because I learned that from a product owner with who I worked, that the wireless trackball allows you to keep it in your hand, so you can even use it doing presentations. So I use it as a clicker on steroids. I can have actually a mouse pointer when I'm walking around. I haven't tried it on a presentation when I'm on stage, because I'm still happy with my current clicker, but I do use it at clients sometimes when I show something. Then I can just, I only bought it recently, so I'm just still experimenting with it, but I saw that product owner doing it and doing really cool stuff with it, because he can just, in the presentation, just move a mouse pointer where you could do it, but he didn't have to sit at a computer. He could just walk around and
Right.
show it. So very interesting.
I love it. I don't often get to talk to people about the ergonomics of the home office, but I think it's a subject that I'd like to dive into more and more, because I think it's more important than people realize.
Yes, well, by thinking a lot about the walking desk, it gradually thinks about all these different kind of things.
Right.
So and it's like we said, it's our body. So I'm a little over 40, 43. So that means that you start to feel your body a little more, or at least I start to feel my body a little more. I'm not a really good sporter. So I've actually, the first year that I had the walking desk, because I was moving so much more, I was able to run. Somehow after the holidays that dropped, so I still need to pick it up again. but I do feel a lot healthier because I move a lot more.
Yeah, I believe it.
And that started basically by Jim Benson's book Personal Kanban, where he talks about a step counter. So we share the same step counter, so a Fitbit One, and the Fitbit One is really what is needed for a walking desk, because you have normal new Fitbits that are on your wrists, but that wouldn't work with a walking desk because basically my hands are on my desk, and so a Fitbit One is just inside my trousers and it's moving.
Oh, I didn't think of that. I don't really like things around my wrist, which is why I liked the Fitbit One, of course. But yeah, it's good to note, actually.
Yeah, so again, a lot more are now around the wrists, which is like, okay, I'm worried that if mine breaks, I will have a problem. But so far, it's working. And okay. What I've noticed that since I have the walking desk, I think a lot more about walking. So, for example, my current client, I mostly go by train. So typically what I do when I go by train is I go to the train station, like, I don't know, I don't like to be there, or didn't like to be there too much early, because then you have to wait and everybody's like, it's boring, the train is late, blah, blah, blah. And what I started doing when I had my walking desk, I realized that, hey, I could walk there. So what I'm doing these days is I'm actually walking little circles in the train station, which got some weird looks the first 2 weeks, I think. But I guess now everybody is used to me walking. And the cool thing is I don't worry anymore if my train is 5 minutes late, because it basically means I can walk, I don't know, 1,000 steps more or something like that. So it's more healthy. I'm in a better mood, because basically when my train is late, for me it means, yoo-hoo, I can move more. So it makes me more happy. It's not
I love the silver lining.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. So let's talk about your remote, you're working with distributed teams and agile. I'd really like to hear that start, because I know there's a big debate in the agile world over can agile teams be distributed? And of course they can, because they have to be in a lot of cases. But
let me say how it started. In 2005, I had to think a little bit about it. It's 2005. I was helping. It's actually my very first complete agile team I was coaching, and we were working with a tool that was from Russia. And we invited these people over, and they were so smart. Really, I'm sorry for everybody else I know, but these were the smartest people with who I ever worked. So my client at the time, my boss, said, let's see if we can work with them, because we need more brains, we need more smart people, and they know their tool very well, and they might be able to help us. And so before I knew it, I think 2 months after I started working there, I was not coaching one local Belgium team, but I was coaching a Belgium team and people from Russia at the same time. And I do remember that it worked really pretty easy. And I remember that I talked to, because I have a personal coach, and so I have coaches. And so I talked to my own coach and said, what am I doing wrong? We're working agile, distributed, and it works. And so that person made me repeat multiple times what I said, until I realized, the goal is not agile. The goal is to help people and to make it work, right? What I think was due at that time, we're talking about 2005, Skype was out, I think, a year or two, something like that, or it started to become popular. And so that was all new. When Agile was started, when they created the manifesto, we didn't have these tools. The internet was already there, but we had email and stuff like that. But we didn't all have these distribution tools.
Right.
So that made a huge difference. We were still having troubles with that, because at one time, I still remember in 2005 or the beginning of 2006, Skype was out for 2 days. And we realized we didn't have any other contacts. We did have email, but that was pretty slow. So contacting them, I don't think we even had their phone numbers. So it was kind of hard to contact each other at that time. So we realized then, okay, we should look for MSN and ways to chat in different ways, so that we're not depending just on Skype. But it really helped a lot. we still brought these people into Belgium, I think once every 2 months. And then they usually, not everybody, but we were having 1 or 2 people from Russia coming over for 2 weeks or a week or two, something like that, sometimes just a week, so that we had a lot more connection there.
I have a question about that actually, which is, do you think it was necessary to meet in person?
Yes.
Yes.
I remember at one point, it was the end of June, and for whatever reason, they couldn't come in June. And July, typically, a lot of people are on holiday in Belgium. And then I think in August, a lot of them were out. So we said, let's not meet in June, let's not meet. So for whatever reason, it was then at the end of September. So a lot later than normally. And by the end of September, we really had 2 teams. They were all about, oh, these Russians, these Belgians, basically almost fighting. And I don't say it was gone the day they came back, but in less than a week, everything was pretty much more back to normal.
Interesting.
So that really, and I think it's, how is it called? Jutta Eckstein, who said about that, you'll pay for travel if you do it or not. So if you don't do the travel, you will pay it because you will be less productive. So yeah, and we've learned that the hard way.
Okay.
We had some similar things. If I would do it back again now with these people, would have gone multiple times over there, because now they always came to Belgium, and we didn't get to Russia. It was planned at some time, but then one of the people, I would say the lead architect or lead developer in Belgium, his wife was about to give birth, so we shifted it around a little bit, and in the end it didn't happen. Or just later, the boss went over there, but none of the technical team, none of the developers went over. And we learned a lot when the boss went over there. Some really stupid things about that they had to pay more for internet bits that were coming from Europe than for local internet bits, things like that really surprised us. So yeah, some stupid things about electricity that could turn off, and I don't know the details anymore, but we learned a lot just by going there.
That's a really good point. It didn't occur to me, of course, if somebody's always coming to one place, it's important that you also go to their culture, especially when it's a different culture, because
exactly,
there's things that you never think of with other cultures.
And it's, the normal things that people recognize. So you have the holidays that are different. You have the whole cultures that are different. I'm thinking about, so we had a 4-hour difference that worked pretty well for us, because basically they could, so what I did, or what we typically did, we sent a lot of questions, a lot of remarks to them in the evening, and then in the morning, so they came in 4 hours earlier so they could work on some stuff. And by the time we came in, they had already half day of work, so we could test some of the stuff, or we could, we were ahead. So, and sometimes when I knew some things were tricky, I would get up a little earlier. I would Skype to them just like I do with you now, very, very early, only after 15 or 10 minutes when I know, okay, it seems they have some answers. I would take only then a shower and then talk a little more if it was needed. And only then later, like an hour later as normal, I would go to the office. But by then, I would have helped them already, and they would have a 2-hour head start. And even if I only had invested, I don't know, half an hour or an hour to that, we would have won some time. That was not needed most of the time because the teams were pretty independent. The stories or the work they worked on at that time was pretty independent, which is something I think is really important when you work distributed. I've been reading a lot the last 2 years about open source and how they deal with stuff. So the typical, the most powerful, not the most known book right now is Work Without Your Pants book from WordPress. And but also a lot of others. And basically what I've seen is that if you can have your work completely independent, which is typically what happens a lot in the open source, everybody works on their little piece, independent of others, and then it's a lot easier to work from different time zones, from different people, because basically you don't need to talk too much. Most of these are then also working, I would say, in a I would say almost without meetings, if I'm hearing correctly. GitHub and WordPress, they don't meet, or they have hardly meetings, and so they also meet once or twice a year with the full team, and then they typically meet someplace else where it's nobody's office. But that it's a lot about bonding and getting to know each other. It's less about doing work. They still do work together, but that's, from what I understand from most of these companies, at that moment less important than making sure that they have, again, a connection.
Right. Right, so that the work needs to be independent, or it doesn't need to be, but it's more it's easier when it's easier.
So if I look at almost all the collaborations that I set up, you talked about retroflexion, you talk about, so I have the Agile conferences calendar, there's a few other things. We have the Who is Agile book. All of that were, I think, at least 10, in some cases, like for the calendar, we have, I think, 60 or maybe 70 people who are helping out. But that work is not organized. It's really like people see something, oh, this is something we can add to the calendar, and they do it, and they have all the rights. So there's no need for communication even there, because people can just do apart what they think needs to be done. And if they need help, there is a mailing list where people can ask questions. And I need to think, 2012, 2011, I did a talk at ALE, so Agile Lean Europe, about some of these projects. And in preparing that, I realized that for all of these projects, I never ever had one meeting with the full team or with everybody who was there, which was interesting. Because in Agile, I don't like meetings, but we still have some regular meetings. We have stand-ups, we have plannings and all this. And for all of these projects, I didn't even have that. What I did have, and that surprised me even more, is that for a lot of these projects, I have a spreadsheet that sets somehow some statistics and show me some of the things that have been done. Where I don't like the spreadsheets in an Agile team. I would like to have a wall with stickies because people can use and see stuff. But of course, that doesn't work with a distributed team.
Right.
So I saw that I used a lot of other tools for distributed communities without even thinking about it. Which is, well, you use what is working. And what I found important for all these communities is that I give people all the rights that they can do everything. I'm not there for administrative things. I'm just making sure for example, the calendars, that Google is really good at it. I can share that calendar with everybody who wants to help out, and I just give everybody full admin rights. That means they can add people to it, they can add events to it, they can even move, they can change events, they can delete them, which is sometimes a problem. But yeah, that it works a lot better or easier.
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, one thing that is important with that is I can still, how do I call it, configure Google Calendar to send me an email every time something is added to such a calendar. So I get a lot of emails when people add it, and typically I don't even look at them. When things are added or when more information was added to it, I don't look at it. What I do look a lot at it is when the things are deleted, because what I've seen over the years is we have, like I said, at least 60 people who have that calendar somewhere in their local Google Calendar, and sometimes they see an event popping up and they think it's in their local calendar and say, no, I'm not going to that event, and they just delete it. So that is important, because in the beginning, I didn't receive these emails, and we had things like, hey, but that thing was added, how is it moved? How is it deleted? So now I know. But again, I won't put it back. I will just send an email to the person who just deleted it and say, did you do that on purpose? Does that conference or event doesn't exist anymore? What's happening? And like in, I don't know, 80% of the cases, oh, I thought it was just locally, sorry. A lot of it, you can just put it back. And I said, no, that's not how it works. You just put it back. And what I've noticed since I started doing that, these people do it once or twice, but then they don't do it anymore.
Okay.
So I give them full responsibility also. There's a few of them who just said, well, okay, apparently I'm not good at that, just remove my rights. I'm not going to do that, it's too risky. That's fine for me as well. But at least they take again responsibility. They made the
decision.
Exactly. So they made the decision, do I want to have this or not?
Now, do you get any abuse with this kind of a system?
Um, I don't think so. There might be people who might add. So the Google Calendar for Agile conferences is really about the conferences. It's not about trainings. So people who are new might add a training to it. And so that's typically when I add people, the first things that they add, I might look a little bit at it. And then we have some discussions. Actually, on the mailing list about that, we now have a discussion because I'm talking about one calendar, but in reality, there's three. There's one for the conferences, there's one for small events, and there is one for submissions. So people that you have a calendar where you can see when you can submit sessions to events and conferences, so that you know, oh yeah, if I want to submit the session for Agile 2015, it's still open, I can do it. The last two are lesser known, and the one for events, it's really unclear at this point what we want to put in. Almost nothing is in there, and so we have a discussion right now in the mailing list. Will we allow trainings, and what kind of trainings? What we're really afraid of is that we'll have some abuse, and a lot of people will start using. So for me, we haven't decided yet on how we will use that. But again, it's a mailing list. Everybody who has access to the calendar is invited to the mailing list. I'm not sure if they all accepted it because it's a Google mailing list. Mm-hmm. But again, typically what I ask people is introduce yourself there, ask some of the questions, and I try to withhold myself for not being the first to answer these questions. Because if I'm the first, it's still all about me, and that's not the idea.
Right. So there's a transparency and a group participation and individual responsibility, and you're kind of facilitating because there's somebody that's kind of making sure that nothing is going too far out, but really you're trying to keep it as minimal as possible. Yeah. That's what I'm hearing anyway.
Yes, that's exactly. And for example, so this calendar, it just started out of personal use. I'm interested in knowing all the conferences where I could talk to or where I could visit. And that was, I think, in 2005 or 2006. But when I created that for my own, I thought, well, there might be other people who are interested. So I started sharing them. And when I had to share them, I was like, okay, should I give them access rights, just visibility, or and very quickly I decided, okay, let's just all give them rights. And because then people started to ask me, could you add this to it? And I said, well, instead of just adding it, I can add you to the calendar.
Right.
It be about the same amount of time, and now you can add it yourself, and you can add, and typically what happens is that people don't add one, but they add two or three, which is improving for everyone. And with 60 people, that means that if everyone adds one or two, we have one or two events for every week.
That's a lot of events.
Exactly. It's of course it's a lot grouped, so there are weeks that you have 5 events, and then you have weeks that there's nothing. Typically between Christmas and New Year, I don't think there is anything that's on the event calendar. Right. But that's just normal because that's how the season works, how the conferences work.
Right.
But the result is that at this point, I'm not adding anything anymore. If I hear about a new event, I'm asking the people, oh, are you interested to put it on? And I just give them the right. So personally, my contribution to the calendar is just by adding people to it. And that's it. So I'm using it to see what's happening, but I'm not adding anything anymore to it. I'm just adding people who could add something to it, which is how it should work for me, because I don't want to be the bottleneck. I try to avoid it, which is something I'm doing as a coach as well. I'm trying to step out as fast as possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes you have people that need some more guidance that you will help a little more. But this one, what I've seen is, of course, the first people I added to were people I trusted 100%. And I know that, and because of that, the trust was there right from the start in this group of people. And what I feel, it's my interpretation, of course, but I think because of that, everybody trusts each other in this group for these kind of things.
Well, now, and I really want to talk about this because I read your blog post about building trust, where I think you called it How Do Teams Build Trust? And trust comes up in every single interview that I do, especially on remote teams, because it seems to be the number one reason that remote teams don't work, is that there's a lack of trust somewhere on the team. So I wanted to pick your brain about what you feel about trust in remote teams and how you think How do teams build trust?
So for me, trust is given. It's not earned. That is really some key part of it.
Okay.
I should give trust to people, and they might show that they're just trustful, but I trust them by default. Because if they have to prove it, for me, I'm not sure what's the right word, but then it's not trust. It's more a fact if they can show that they're trustworthy. Of course, there is different, and that's actually something, I think it's Jürgen Appelo who pointed me to that. Yeah, but would you trust these people to operate your brain? Of course not. So that's a different kind of level of trust. It's also gradually, this is what you do with children as well. You let them do something in a safe environment where you think they might do it, and so you're giving them trust to let them do stuff. And typically, or what I'm trying to do, is I'm giving them a little more option to do something than I think my kids are capable to do. And I'm every time I'm confused is not the right word. I'm surprised by what my children can do. I have one idea in mind that when my oldest son, who's now 12, was 5 or 6, I got a phone call from our neighbors, and she said, "Well, your son is here." I was like, "No, I'm in the train. I'm going to pick him up at school." And she was, "No." So what happened was that he was with the bicycle to school, and normally when he goes with the bicycle, when he leaves school, we're there waiting for him, and we bicycle back. This day we were not. So for whatever reason, we still put him. He went to school with a bicycle, and we told him, like, you have to wait. I'll pick you up an hour later, and we bicycle. We'll just go by bike home. But he forgot about it, which is normal at 5 or 6. You don't think about these things. So he comes out of school. He drives his bike, and he doesn't see us, but he knows the safe way to go home. And he says, "Well, okay." I start cycling home. While he was halfway, he realized that will not help me because they're not home. But he was too scared to drive back to school because he's not supposed to leave school. So he just goes home, starts playing in the garden, which is open, so he has that possibility. After, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, he realized maybe I should go to the neighbor and ask for help or do something. Which was funny because the doorbell was too high, so he couldn't reach it. So he had to jump up and down to reach it until he made a sound that she heard him. And then, so she entered him, "Do you want something to eat? A little milk, a sandwich or something?" He said, "No, I have to do my homework." So he was sick and was like, "Okay, I can assure you that homework, that's totally different these days." But yeah, for us parents, it was like, okay, he actually knew very well how to handle that situation. He took a lot of problems that were there and he solved them in his particular way with what his capabilities. So that showed me already, like, okay, he can do that. That didn't mean that and this is going back to trust again, did we trust him from the next day that he could go home at that time? We said no. Although we knew from the school that some kids could do it at that age. For us, it was, we're not sure yet, but technically he had proven that he was capable. So we removed some of that trust in that sense that we said, no, we don't want you. The understanding or the way we explained it to us is that it was not so much about him, it's more about the environment, but I'm not sure if that's fully true. It's really about, okay, we didn't let him do this.
You know, it sounds to me like, so you've given your son what had the autonomy in that situation, and also the people that you're adding to the calendar, they also have the autonomy in their situation to behave in the proper way. And it's interesting because it sounds like by giving people autonomy in this way that we build trust. Oddly enough, like when we let go, somehow the trust strengthens. Which is a weird thing.
I think I'm not sure if I said it this week or last week, but I remember saying it not so long ago that if you treat children like adults or like grown-ups, they behave a lot like grown-ups. And if you treat grown-ups like adults, they start behaving like children. They start behaving like children. And this is what I see a lot in teams. And it doesn't matter if they're local teams or distributed teams. Actually, with distributed teams, you don't have much choice. It's not that I can walk over or take a plane to go back to these Russians and sit behind their desks to see what they're typing. I cannot do that. So I have to give them trust. And okay, what I see a lot of people doing with working distributed is you have to send it and you have to give all your hours. But the less trust I give them, the more they feel distrusted, and the more, for me, it creates chaos most of the time.
So what would your advice be to a manager who is trying to behave in a more trustful way for their team? How would somebody as a manager, maybe even as a team member, how would you start building trust on your team? How did you start?
What I've noticed is that I start, so when I worked with these people in Russia, I talked a lot on Skype. So I really, I joked that at some point that I was talking more with these people in Russia than I was talking to my wife, because I was 5 to 6 hours that I was talking or chatting with them, which was not the same amount of time I was spending with my wife, just full time talking.
Right.
I mean,
right.
You could be together for 4 hours, but you don't talk for 4 hours,
Right.
which was different. So basically we created kind of, I'm not sure. I don't think I knew Scrum at the time. So I think I only followed Scrum training in 2006. So in 2005, I was behaving a lot as a kind of coach in the local team, and I had somebody who was much more a technical lead, but not a coach. But how would I say it? I created a lot of connection with that person and a lot of trust. So. And I trusted him on some of these things. We still have hard discussion. It doesn't mean that I'm not verifying or not asking questions. I want to understand a lot more. But still, you offer people the possibility. You let them do some of the stuff. And I'm personally never interested in hours. What I've seen in a lot of companies is just local companies, there's a lot of focus on how many hours you do. For me, that's a lot of focus on cost and not on value. I prefer to focus on value. What do you want to get out? And with distributed teams, for me, that would be the number one advice. Make sure that you tell them what you want, which is basically normal Scrum. You give a story and you give you describe what's the functionality you expect. You describe some acceptance criteria, and then you let go. And they can come back if they have questions. And I can see that in multiple directions. The more you're clear about what your goals are, the better you are off.
Right, and the focus on results instead of time, which
yes,
makes perfect sense. So it sounds to me like your method of trust is really over communication and really building that relationship with that person by communicating with them a lot. And on Skype, if you can't be in person, it sounds like Skype for you really worked.
Yes, I know teams. I know teams where they even have Skype open full time, so that there is connections in both directions. Something else that we did in other teams is that, so for example, once you have a team, I worked in a situation where we had teams that were more or less the same size on both sides. So in this case, what you would call local and the distributed team, more or less the same size. So at that time, there were no electronical tools that were even close to what I would say close to decent. I'm not sure who had a tool at that time, so they might disagree with me, but at least we didn't find tools that were remotely reasonable that could do it. So we had some problem there, but what we created is we created the local whiteboard just with the stickies like you always do with a local team, or you do a lot with local teams, and we created the same one on the other side.
Okay.
And instead of having, so we experimented a lot with having a joint stand-up at both sides, and that never really worked. It was really hard to do that. So at one point, and I don't think I invented it, I think it was someone from the team who just said, why can't we just have 2 stand-ups? So what we started doing is they synchronized. So one person from this country talked to one person here. They just talked before the stand-up, and then they had their local stand-up. So everybody talked locally. So they synced locally, and then they had they synced over Skype or over whatever tool they wanted to use, and then they had their local stand-ups. And so once or twice every week, we took a picture from the whiteboards and we sent them over and we checked, hey, are they in sync? Which was very interesting, because what we learned we found out every week we found out one or two things that were not in sync, but these were the really important things to discuss, because that meant that people forgot to talk about that, which is things that you will not see with a distributed tool, because it will just be updated and they have the status, but if they didn't talk about it, they might not realize it, which is interesting.
Wow. That is interesting, because I was just about to ask, why not use a distributed sticky board? An
Yeah,
online sticky note board. And this would be a very good reason for not doing that.
but so like I said, at that time that didn't exist, so we could not. But it turned out for us to work really, really well. Of course, this is two teams more or less the same size, so you could have a buddy on the other side. And what we added, so it was a rotating buddy system. So today I might talk to you, tomorrow, the next sprint I talk to someone else, and you talk to someone else on my side, which gave the extra thing you talked about, over communication. Basically, everybody had someone who he talked to at least for one sprint. So there was a lot of personal connection there, because typically how that goes is in a stand-up, a distributed stand-up, we might talk a little bit personal, but not too much. We might do that until everybody's there, and then we start and we be very productive, and let's not talk personal anymore.
Right. Get in, get out.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we're there with 10 or 20 people, so we want to be as focused as possible. So we might talk and joke a little bit while not everybody's there, but from the moment either the time is there or everybody's there, we start to behave professional, which is normal because we're with 10, 15 people and we want to use the time as best as possible. But if you do that one-on-one, it's less disturbing. You can just have a talk a little bit and say, well, today I had a bad day, I don't feel well, or I don't know, my wife is ill, or my family has some kind of problem. So we might share just a little bit. But if you do that for 2 weeks, it creates a little bound. So that creates a little more. And so after 2 weeks, we rotate. So because we have a new sprint, we do a small rotation. And so I create a local connection with everybody on the other side, which helps a lot.
Well, I like the idea of having the rotating buddy, so that you're not just with this one person all the time, that you're actually creating kind of a strong bond throughout the team that way.
Yes.
That's an interesting technique.
But both having a buddy and rotating it, for me, only works, or at least I have the feeling it only works when you have more or less the same size. Because otherwise I have to have two buddies on. And so once we start, again, one-on-one connections are much stronger than multiple connections. Yeah,
I like that. I think that's really good advice. Okay, well, we're nearing. I said I was going to try to keep it to 30 minutes, but there was no way I could talk to you for just 30 minutes. I could continue talking to you for the next few hours. I think this is great, but I know we're nearing the end of the hour, so I wanted to. Is there anything quickly that we didn't touch on that you're dying to tell?
There were at least two topics that I thought I should tell, and I didn't write them down, so I forgot about it. So at this point, no. Okay. I think I said the most important things. With this, I maybe want to stress out about the distributed part. This is something. It's probably one of, except on my walking desk blog part, this is the most sought blog post, because a lot of people always say, yeah, but you need electronic tools because you have a distributed teams, and I know it's not true. I'm not saying distributed tools or electronic tools are bad. I'm just saying you should know why to use them. And so so normal tools, or the whiteboard tools, can still work with a distributed team. And it might be a good way to figure out why we need them. And then once we have figured out how that works, we can say, how could an electronic tool work with us? Right. And that's the same thing with a normal local team or a distributed team. That said, that is only if you really need that stand-up. Like I said, if the work is really separated, there might be less need for stand-ups and all of these things. And I think the Agile community can learn a lot from what the open source community is doing. Because basically, there you have two teams with, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of people, and they work, and everybody just focuses on what they like to do. I'm not saying
there's no managers.
There's no, well, if you would
there's
think
some.
about Drupal or Linux, there's probably some people who have some kind of role that could be compared to managers, or could be, but it's a lot less. It's much more on self-organizing and a lot more on trust. But there are clear rules, and everybody has to play by these rules, and that's how these things happen. And it's not at all open source projects work. There are a lot of them who don't work at all, and of course we only know about the big projects that work. But I think, I'm not sure if it's that worse than in real life in corporate world, because I know a lot of projects that don't work either, and that you have people trying to control it, giving the impression it's working better, but it's not always the case.
Right.
So yeah.
At least in the open source world, it seems like it's a lot more transparent, and we're talking about the failures more than maybe in the corporate world. At least that's my feeling.
Well,
somehow.
They're out of it in the open, but I think there's a lot of them who are very, very small open source projects that just don't get any traction. What I've learned about from the open source, from the little collaborations that I'm doing, is that it's a lot about the communication, about looking forward and making sure that you focus. This is why I'm focusing on communication for the Agile calendars. This is making it work because I'm focusing on that, and because of that, I can let go of the calendar, but it works in both directions. Because I let go, people can step up and do step up. So,
and because you've communicated the needs and you're approaching people personally when something happens, like, hey, did you mean to delete that event?
Exactly.
And you're sort of educating and talking at the same time.
Yes. There still is. It's interesting that you say personal, because for example, I'm not sure if I have one for the deletion, but for people adding to the calendar, that's a template I can just copy paste, but I will still write the name and I will add something personal to it. But a lot of the largest part is just a template, because it helps to send the same message to everyone. But I definitely will write a personal introduction to it. And I'm pretty sure if I just forget to add the name, that person will work less for it, because they don't feel personally connected to these things.
Right. And I can imagine, I mean, the standard information stays the same, so there's no reason that it shouldn't be a template, but
exactly.
adding just, I mean, because you need to convey this information, like this is the rules, and that stays the same for everybody. But
exactly.
I like the idea. When I was building private social networks, one of the main rules that we always told community managers was be sure to welcome people when they come into your community, and welcome them in a personal way. Send them a link to a book that they might like. Just take a glance at their LinkedIn profile, and there's always something that you can.
Yes, and well, what I've asked all these people, always introduce yourself on the mailing list, right? And once you introduced yourself onto the mailing list, they will always say something where I can say something about it. Right. It might be that it completely surprises me and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that, which is enough. But in a lot of cases, they have some kind of thing that brought them to this thing, or they know me, or they know someone else I do know, and there is some connection. So that always brings up something. What I'm now trying, and this is the hardest part, is that for some of these communities, I'm trying to step back and hoping that other people will welcome them. But that's really a thin line, because if I don't go fast enough welcoming them, they don't feel welcome. But if I go too quickly, others won't do it. So I have to play a little bit around with that. But it's really important. I think this is, again, creative collaboration agent. It means working on collaboration. It's when you talk about what you just described for the community. For me, it's community management on all these kind of things. And maybe I'm more a community manager on agile projects than I am a coach. I don't think so, because I still bring on other stuff. But the community part is really important to that. I want the teams to behave as a community.
Yeah, so we have to build them like communities. And if you were going to have a party, somebody would come into your house and you would say, welcome to my house, and have a seat and let me get you a drink. And it would be the same on a distributed team. Welcome to the team. Let me show you around. This is how this works. And
it's insane. I'm working as a consultant. So I'm coming to a lot of companies. It's incredible how they don't have that. They don't have a welcome pack. They don't have I've been having companies where I don't have a computer for 2 months. And I
Wow.
don't have, so yeah, of course, luckily that's for more than a year, or no, it's probably about 4 years or 5 years ago since that happened. But still, I still see it happening,
Yeah.
that they don't think about that. With the teams I'm working with, I'm asking them to create uh, um, a blog post or whatever, some kind of document that says how we will welcome them. And I let the people who last came to the team edit it and say this worked and this doesn't work, so that at least we can improve this, because this is one of the ways how we improve it. And that is really important. People should feel welcome, because you hired them because you thought they were really good, they were the best to come to your team, because that's why you hired person X and you didn't hire the other person. And then we treat them like idiots, or we don't tell them anything. People are not aware. I've seen companies where people just show up and nobody knows that, hey, there was going to be a new person on our team. Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, there is a share. We have to look what we'll tell you, because we don't have time
Yeah.
and we didn't prepare for that, or nobody told me.
And it must feel horrible as an employee going into a situation like that. I mean, I started working at a company once, and I was so excited. It was a great project and a great place, but something new for me. And on the first day, they basically just sat me down at a desk and nobody talked to me. But they all just kept working as normal. And I thought, well, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what the program, I started to, I was kind of asking around, but I felt my stomach sank on that first day. Because I
Well,
thought,
I have the opposite story I can tell, and that might be a good one to end off.
end on, yeah.
Because we talked about trust. So October 2000. So in 2013, I was interested. I had a client who was interested in the Spotify model. They read Henrik Nieberg's articles, and they were, hey, we want to do the same thing. And I was like, I don't think you're ready. But somehow I thought, instead of just reading and talking to all these coaches, I would really like to learn a lot more about how Spotify works. So I just wrote an email to Henrik and asked, hey, would it be possible for me to work 1 week at Spotify? I know I learn most by doing, so I thought, let's just work there 1 week. And so to cut a long story short, I was able to do that. And on the first day, on the Monday, I did a leadership game, something I created in 2004. And so I brought all my stuff. So it's a large suitcase full of Lego. We played that. And we played that in the evening. So at 9, I think at 7 or at 9, at 8 we started. So it's a 3-hour game. So I think about at 10 we stopped. So while we were stopping, people were cleaning up, and I just had to put everything, the latest Lego, into my suitcase. And I looked up, and I was alone in that room. And I'm not sure if I was the only one at Spotify, but when I walked down, I didn't meet anyone. So I was there in a building. That was my very first day. Okay, they made me sign an NDA. They made me sign some other stuff. But I was alone. Nobody escorted me in or out. And I was like, this is a company that works fully on trust. That they said right from the start, we're asking you to sign an NDA, so we trust you, behave as an adult, and you're not going to publish and say anything about some of the stuff that we're just secretly not going to talk. But I could see everything. But the most important example for me was that evening, because it was the very first day. And at 10 o'clock in the evening, I didn't see anyone anymore. I assumed there were still some people working, but I didn't walk out. I didn't look, hey, where is there anyone? I just normally went out to the door, and I didn't meet anyone. So it was like, this is really trust.
Yeah, that's a good example.
And that's much better as your example, where you just sit down and you have to figure out, who could I talk to? Who's even on my team? And who?
Right.
Yeah, why am I even here?
Right. I felt very unwelcome, and it just went downhill from there. So it was sort of a.
But that's exactly that. The company is taking all this effort to hire someone because they think you're the best for whatever reason.
Right.
And then they treat you like shit. And of course, even if they would have wanted to pick that up, it would cost a lot of energy from both of you and from that company. So it's just a shame. If they would have just invested, I don't know, half an hour the day before, you would have felt so much more welcome. If they would have just introduced you, walked you around, things like that, it's so much easier.
Yeah. And I think that with online and distributed teams, that it sort of becomes extra important because of the isolation. The isolation is the norm. At least in
Yes.
an office, you're there with people. So.
Well, you need to find ways to deal with that. So I have distributed teams where we just printed off the pictures from everyone who was offline, so that we are online, so we can at least look at them. So when we talk to them, even if it's just voice, I have the pictures on the wall, so I know how they look. Which
That's
is something that what Skype allows me to have change a picture or whatever, but just having them on the wall might be interesting. Especially the Russians, for example, they had a few people who had the exact same name. They're all called Alexei, and then it's a lot harder to know which Alexei I'm talking to.
That's true. That's true.
So just things like that. I didn't do that trick with the printing with the people from Russia, but it would have helped. And just small things like that is that, okay, you still have to remember, I'm trying to save pictures from everyone or take pictures from everyone I'm meeting online, and because I want, when I receive an email, I want a picture from that person attached to my email. When they call me, I want to see the picture. Why? Because I'm really bad with names and the pictures that tell me something.
Mm-hmm.
So small little things that can help create trust in all kinds of directions.
Well, and it humanizes it also because it's so technical. Yeah. So one final question for you, which is, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that? Where can they find you?
Probably the best is on Twitter. So Yves Hanoulle, so first name, last name in one thing. It's actually the same thing on Skype. And it's first name at last name .be as well, and an email. So that's already a few other ways to get in touch. What I do prefer is that they do have a little introduction. So what I'm hating, for example, LinkedIn, I think I get about 5 requests every week, with just people, bluff, you're there, we want to connect, but just a normal LinkedIn connection. And sometimes it's people I've met, but like I said, I'm really bad with names. So if you don't tell me why you met me, it's really hard for me to figure out why you want to get in touch with me.
Right. So personalize it. Send a generous welcome.
Exactly. I think that's the general message in sort. So maybe just as a wrap up, to look at, we talked about the walking desk. Let's see how much. We were at 17,000 when we started, or in the introduction. So I'm at 24,000 steps right now. So wow. I did 7,000 steps since we started working. So
wow, that's impressive, because people might not know, but you're supposed to do about 10,000 steps a day. That's considered the healthy amount of steps.
Yeah. So
you've now done 24,000 steps.
I do feel it now. It's not really sweating, but I don't need to do more to start sweating. Right. I think. If I would not have been in a video, I would have probably, like 10 minutes ago, turned it a little bit lower. Okay. I was thinking at some point, is it going? It still worked, so it was not like it didn't work at all, but I felt it. So, and like you see, it still is possible. I'm just feels very sorry for the people who have to look at this video, because it's probably a lot shaky by moving.
Actually, you know what? I totally got used to it. It didn't distract me at all after a while.
Okay, so that's one thing that people can do to get in touch with me, to tell me if that distracted them, yes or no.
All right.
If they tell me, I will know they watched until the end. So,
okay. So I'll do the walking desk as a distraction. I'll put that in the show notes also. Okay, great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's been really great to talk with you. And for all of those who are watching, until next time, be powerful.
Okay.